This is Codefinity, and definitely my first time making a C# video. So just kind of got up this morning and decided I'd make one. I don't know why. So I'm going with a very simple example, kind of setting the bar low here. So if you're looking for some advanced C# knowledge, do yourself a favor and go watch a different video. But otherwise, stick around for a few basics on how to write a simple C# program. So what is Fizzbuzz? Kind of a classic program that people try out in different languages. So all we do is print all of the numbers from 1 to 100. It doesn't have to be 1 to 100. And if the number is divisible by 3, we put a fizz by it. If it's divisible by 5, we put a buzz by it. So like 3, 6, 9, and 12 all have fizzes. 5 and 10 have a buzz. In the event that the number is divisible by both 3 and 5, in other words, 15 or 30, then we write Fizzbuzz. So this is a classic exercise that people try out in different languages. I've actually had this given to me in a basic interview in the past. So one more time, you're just printing the numbers 1 to 100. And if it's divisible by 3 or it's a multiple of 3, you write fizz. If it's divisible or a multiple of 5, you write buzz. And if it's true for both, you write Fizzbuzz. So 3, 6, 9, 12 are all fizz. 5 and 10 are buzz. 15 and 30 are Fizzbuzz. Okay, let's look at the code here. I am doing this in NET6. And just to clarify there, when you work with C# and the .NET framework, you have different versions you can put in. Actually, NET7 is the preview version, but NET6 is the LTS, or kind of the standard or long-term support version. And then there is NET5, which is really popular also. Not everyone's moved to NET6. So I will point out a few differences with NET6 along the way, but this stuff is pretty basic. So I've actually just put everything in one file. Originally I was going to do a couple of classes, but I've just made a basic solution here with one project. That's what they call it at .NET. You create a solution, and your solution wraps up different projects that all kind of talk to each other, but that's definitely beyond our scope here. So we just have a very simple console application where everything I've just put in one file. Again, typically you would break things up into classes and do some other stuff, but maybe another time. Okay, I'm going to hide my sidebar because we only care about the one file. And this is the entire program here. Now, if you've had some experience in previous versions of .NET, this might throw you off here. It turns out in NET6, one thing that I really like, especially coming from a JavaScript background where we don't have to wrap everything in classes, for very, very simple one-off, one-file programs, you don't need to create any namespaces, classes, none of that. So you just get in here, and it kind of feels a little bit like JavaScript, actually. So this is pretty cool. You can only do this in NET6. With NET5, you would have to have your public static void main. And for most real programs, you're going to want to have that anyway. So coming in here, establishing that NET6, we don't need any of that stuff. We can just get into the code. Pretty cool. We're just setting up a for keyword, and this is a very classic loop in many languages. The first part of what goes in the parentheses here, this is where you're starting. This is where you're ending, and this is your increment. So typically you're going to start at like 1 or 0. And in this case, we want to go all the way up to and including the number 100. And we want to increment by 1. Okay. Another thing with a language like C#, people typically aren't using the var keyword all that much. I'm not sure. I think this might be a NET6, or it might also work in NET5. I'm not sure. But we do have the option to use a var keyword. When we use var in C#, rather than specifying that this is an int, because I could very easily have just said int and everything would have been fine here also. But by using var, it's a little bit like, I guess I'm being a little bit lazy. I'm just saying, hey, C#, you figure out what that's supposed to be, because it's not that serious. I'm not doing a bunch of conversions into different types and anything like that, so I'm just going to stick with var. So I like to use var for these types of basic variables at least. So C# kind of looks at var and says, oh, okay, good, I know what this is, and we hover over it. It tells us that it's an integer, or an int32 to be more specific. So var is kind of fun. when you just want to let C# kind of do its thing and it's nothing that serious going on. Great, so I've got var. Once again, the for keyword in parentheses. I am setting up my starting point. I want to start at 1, and I want to keep track of where I am in this variable called I, which is usually short for index, right? It doesn't have to be I, it could be Daffy Duck, but it's just usually a convention, I for index. So again, I'm using var because it's just an integer and var works just fine, so I'm just going to use var. And I want to increment this one at a time. That's what the I++ is. Like whatever I is, go ahead and update it, add 1 to this. And keep doing this until we get to the 100. And that's how we create a basic loop going from 1 to 100. Now within the loop, we want to wrap our code in some braces. That's establishing what's called scope. Doesn't really matter for what we're doing here. And then we're also creating these conditionals here that do our checking, okay? And there's definitely multiple ways to write this, but generally what we're saying here is, hey, this number I that starts at 1 and goes to 100, if it is divisible by 15, what this means is percentage sign. This is called a modulo operator or modulus operator, and it means take this number, divide it by this one, and just give me the remainder, right? So if, say, the number is 15, and we say 15 mod 15, the remainder is going to be 0 because it's divisible by 15. So that's what we're saying here. If the number is divisible by 15, if the remainder is equal to 0. Now we've got a double equals here, which is a comparison operator. So again, here we're starting I or index equal to 1. We're setting it equal. This is an assignment operator. This is a comparison operator. This is saying, no, I don't want to change anything. I just want you to take whatever this is, and I want you to compare it with this. Actually, I think it compares the right to the left, but the result is the same. So I want you to look at the number 0 and compare it to this. Are they the same? Is this equal to 0? So that's when you see the double equals. It's a comparison operator. This is an assignment operator. And while we're at it, this is an incremental operator. This is also a comparison operator because I want to get out of this for loop, right? If I've gotten to 100, as long as I'm less than 100 or I'm equal to 100, keep this loop going, right? So assignment, comparison, increment. All right, so from there, it just kind of follows through. We're saying, hey, if it's divisible by 15, if when we divide by 15, the remainder is 0, do some stuff in these braces, which actually it's kind of cool. We can just hover and see what's in there. And that's where we see the Fizz Buzz. I'm not even going to open these now. We can just look at it that way. Otherwise, or else, if it's divisible by 3, if when we divide by 3 the remainder is 0, do this thing, and likewise with 5. So with the else here, these are all mutually exclusive. Only one of these is going to take effect. We're going to check this condition, and if this works, we're just going to move on to the next number in our for loop. Otherwise, if this is not working out, okay, let's try this one. Is it divisible by just the 3? Okay, otherwise, is it divisible by just the 5? Otherwise, if none of these work out, else, just write the number. And see that I there, where does that come from? That comes from right here, because we created a local variable of the type integer called I for index. So that is Fizzbuzz in C# and very similar structure to other languages. Once again, we used a for loop. We wanted to keep doing the code in here as long as our index I was between 1 and 100. Started off at 1, keep running it till it's less than or equal to 100, and keep incrementing it by 1. And then we set up some conditionals in here, some branches. So we had multiple conditions, and we saw if this is true, do this thing, and keep the loop going. We use the else keyword to make sure only one of these actually happens for each iteration of the for loop. That's the fancy word when you loop. You're iterating over stuff. And I don't know, I guess we've kind of extracted everything we can out of this. So if there are any questions, feel free to put them in the comments, and I don't know, I'll probably take a look at them. So thanks for watching.